Hello and welcome. My name is John on behalf of Xenotheory.org, and I want to thank you for choosing to be here and watch this video. I'm doing this today in response to a lot of questions I have been asked after I've just created this graphic after tracking consecutively 2,500 plus days of my life, extracting meticulous data from it. For context, this is a story of my life. Now, I want to make sure that you get the most utility and value out of this, so I'm not going to sit here and explain what I've learned about myself and my life and my traits, etc. Rather, I want to explain to you 3 benefits of the actual behavior and methodology itself of tracking. But first, before I get into that, I have to address some preliminary questions. First is, why do it in the first place? That seems extremely tedious. Having a piece of paper you have to write on every single day, it's probably going to get monotonous. It's probably going to get mundane. People argue it takes the spontaneity out of life, etc. So before I get into those 3 benefits, I want to get into 3 reasons why we should do this in the first place. The first reason is that the measure of man, your actual measure, your value is in service. Think about it like this. Anytime somebody compliments you, anytime you get compensation, anytime you get actually paid or rewarded for performing a role, think about the implications behind that. If someone says you're a good father, you're a good husband, you're a good insert job title here, whatever the role happens to be that you're playing at that current moment, think about the implications behind that statement. What are you doing in a role? You are serving. Your measure is in service. Now the question is, how do you become a better person, father, husband, job title, whatever role you want to be? The answer is to be able to increase your capacity to provide service. The only place that you provide service from is from a reservoir of competence. You establish and build and accumulate and add to this reservoir of competence as you move through your life with experiences, but more importantly, as you get from your life. Okay, don't be on the side of the dichotomy in the spectrum of getting through life, getting through your day, just trying to get to the weekend so you can waste your time in hedonism and shallow pleasures. When you're getting from life, you're not leaving anything on the table. You're extracting a lot of insights. The only way to get from life, the only way to get from a day is to write it down, is to extract it. You have to analyze things. You have to create a reservoir of competence that you're going to add information, add insights, add experiences and evaluations to. The moment that you stop actively growing and learning and analyzing and getting from your life, the clock starts ticking until the day that you have nothing left to give. Reason number 2, monitoring your progress increases goal attainment. This is actually a study published by American Psychological Association. I will leave that in the link below. The conclusion was increasing progress monitoring engenders a meaningful improvement in rates of behavioral performance and goal attainment. Our conclusion is that progress monitoring has a robust effect on goal attainment and constitutes a key component of effective self-regulation. When I was a personal trainer many years ago, every single new client, what we would do with them, we would hand them this actual journal. What we were supposed to do was log all of your workouts. So the very act of writing something down, the very act of measuring something implies you're trying or you have the potential to improve it. You cannot improve anything you do not measure. Now, we understand this implicitly because when you're measuring something, all you're doing is providing a frame of reference for baseline, and you can compare and contrast accordingly in the future. A lot of people do this mentally in their head, and it's very amorphous, it's very vague. You don't actually know where you are. And when you make progress, you don't actually know how much progress you've made because it's vague. You have a cloud and you have a cloud. It's not clearly defined. It's not written down. It's not metricized. It's not in a number. It's not in data format. So the more vivid the comparison, so in other words, the more you can get it reduced to numbers, the less amorphous the improvement that you have made in your life. Reason number 3 is ultimate personal accountability. It is very easy, especially with the age of social media, to portray a fabricated and contrived appearance of success, of competence, of wealth, of whatever it happens to be. And first of all, nobody is going to check you on that. And nobody, I would take this a little bit further. Nobody can check you on that because they don't actually know what you're doing day in, day out. Everybody only knows what you exhibit to them. So even if you have an accountability partner, which is good, it's better than nothing, they don't actually know what you're truly up to behind closed doors unless you tell them, which that's assuming you have a lot of self-awareness and self-knowledge to tell them the truth about yourself. Now, I'll leave you with this. When you write something down on paper, you are experiencing your thoughts staring back at you in the face. If I track my day, if I analyze my input, if I'm holding myself accountable and writing down my goals and writing down and tracking what I've done since the moment that I woke up, everything that I did in terms of my exercising and my diet today, what I inputted, what I read, what I what environments I expose myself to, if all of that was a net destructive effect, if I was just wasting my time on social media, scrolling through Instagram, scrolling on YouTube, whatever it happens to be, I'm going to feel stupid when I look at that. When I write it down and look at it later in the day, I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to have a guilty conscience. I'm going to regret that I did that day. If I don't write it down, it stays foggy, it stays amorphous, and I don't know what I actually did, nor do I know if I'm on track for my goals. And I think the reason a lot of people do this is because they fear failure. They have a bad relationship with failure, because once you clearly establish a goal and you start to track it, also simultaneously, you have the clarity of success and the clarity of failure clearly defined for you. You will know exactly if you are off course. Exactly. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. If you stay vague, if you have a vague goal, you generally want to go in some direction, and you generally don't track your life, you're just generally going off a understanding and memory, it's going to be very vague. And then therefore the failure is also going to be vague. You're not going to know if you actually failed, but the consequence of that is you're not going to know if you're actually succeeding or progressing in life as well. So those are the 3 reasons why I think everybody should have some element, at least some vestige of degree of tracking in their life. You don't have to get as meticulous and analytical as me. Admittedly, I personally just like data. I like numbers. I have an affinity for that stuff, which is why I created graphs. It's not necessary, so to speak. I just like visualizing it. So I'm going to move into the benefits that I have learned from 2,500 consecutive days of tracking my life. Now, benefit and realization number 1, consistency is always better than intensity. Going back to this personal training example, I can give you an example of one of these approaches, being intensity. Intensity is somebody who, and this is a real life example I've had, a personal training client who, she wanted to lose an exorbitant amount of weight. It was like 20 or 30 pounds in like a month and a half or something crazy. Now, is it possible? Arguably, not healthy, I don't think. I'm not a weight loss expert by any means, but what you're going to have to do is take a very intense approach. You're going to have to radically change your entire lifestyle, your entire routine to try to accommodate to get these results. And what that looks like is it's usually short-term, emotionally motivated. So this particular client, she had a wedding to go to. It wasn't her wedding. She wanted to attend it, and she wanted to go to the beach or something and wear a swimsuit, whatever happened to be, which, first of all, I think it was ironic that she could get in shape for other people for a wedding, but she couldn't get in shape for herself years prior. None of my business, though. So she's taking a very intense, short-term approach, immediate gratification approach. She's doing all this crazy, extreme dieting, all these juice fasts and cleanses and whatnot. I'm giving her adequate workouts, but she's saying it's not enough because she's not seeing rapid change on the scale. So what she did was, after our workout together, which she was sore, she didn't think it was sufficient for whatever reason. Again, probably the immediate gratification thing. She gone out on her own volition, on her own accord, and she decided to run up these steps, like at a stadium, at a football stadium or something. And this was a couple of days after our leg workout. She texts me and says, "Hey, I tore my quad muscle. I'm not going to be able to work out anymore." So she took a very intense approach. She was not approaching it with longevity in mind, versus a client who they understand, yes, I need to be in a deficit to lose weight, but I'm not going to starve myself. I'm not going to deprive myself. I'm going to create a routine I can keep for years, because health should be something at baseline. It's not something you just randomly earn, then fall off, randomly earn, then fall off. You have one body for the rest of your life. This is your only home. This is in absolute dominion and over your control at all times for the rest of your life. You should have that in order. That should be a baseline. It should be a consistent approach. It shouldn't be an intense approach. This is illustrated in the discrepancy between discipline and motivation. Discipline is a consistent approach. It's doing things that you have set for yourself regardless of how you feel, regardless of your emotions, because you and I know if we only acted when we felt like acting, nothing would get done. Motivation is nice to have, and I argue when you have that motivation, take an intense approach for that day, right? If you can do something for that day, okay, but if the motivation wanes, as it eventually will, and dissipates, then take a consistent approach. So you can actually kind of coalesce both, but most people go too far on the intense spectrum, in the intense side of the spectrum. They have no consistency. They have no sustainable routine for long term. So rely on discipline, and when you track things, when you're looking at everything every day, when you're relying on disciplines, you have a sustainable approach. Now, I'm going to illustrate this with my own life as well, with my disciplines that I've tracked throughout the years. So if you see this is the entire infographic I have. If you're interested in looking at something like this, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a link in the description. If you're watching this on my website, it'll be on this page. This is a graph of my disciplines and the percentages I've executed on them throughout the year. So I'm going to give you an example in my own life of intensity versus consistency. I took a very intense approach in my life in 2020 to execute on all of my disciplines, and I actually succeeded. I was 100% effective in executing every single day on all of these 9 activities, every single day in 2020. But what happened was it was not sustainable. I was depriving myself of other experiences and enjoyable activities throughout the day. I would say no to a lot of things. I would say no to a lot of people at the expense of, hitting my disciplines. So I know that wasn't sustainable, and this is why, one of the reasons why 2021 was a lot lower in the majority of them. Now, am I upset over that? Not particularly, because in life it's always it's always about a trade-off. It's always about a sacrifice. But I can also extract a lot of psychological insight and value if I have, which I do, the data around 2020 and 2021 and what I was thinking, what my goals were, what my priorities were, etc. Another example of this consistency versus intensity approach that coincides with the 2020 disciplines is my caloric intake. So I've always been trying to gain weight and build muscle, so I'm trying to always increase my caloric intake. So 2018 to 2019, I added about 100,000 calories, which is only about 30 a day. 2019 to 2020, the intense year, I added almost 300,000 calories. That's an additional intake of 800 calories a day. That's almost an extra meal every single day. As you can see, I bounced off of that high point and I reverberated back to a more sustainable approach, which is about 3,500 calories or almost 3,600. And I almost dropped 100,000 calories from 2020 to the next year. Benefit and realization number 2. With frequent self-analysis and reflection, there is always a return on your investment of time. Sometimes we go through life and we change roles, we change titles, we change jobs, career paths, trajectories, relationships, partnerships, etc. And a lot of people think that you have to start back at baseline. You have to start back at zero. You're starting at nothing again. You have to build yourself up. That is only the case if you don't have this reservoir of competence to extract from. You don't extract from your life. You're getting through your life. That is only the case if you are unaware and you're leaving a lot of psychological information and data and insight on the table, so to speak. If you are tracking your behaviors, you can go through a lot of mundane jobs, a lot of mundane relationships, a lot of mundane activities, and even though you got nothing of immediate utility out of that relationship per se, you can say that relationship was a failure, but in reality, it was a learning experience if you've extracted data from it. If you've extracted data about yourself, if it illuminated parts of yourself, constituents of your psyche to your awareness, it was a win, I would say. That was an investment. It wasn't a loss. So you have to apply these losses to your ideal, and then your losses become your investments. They only become investments when you have an ideal and when you are tracking. If not, if you don't have goals, if you're not tracking your progress, you're taking L's in life. You're losing. You're going down, and you're starting from a lower point. If you have a goal, you might make that mistake, you might make that bad relationship, that bad job, but you're extracting information from it. You're starting the next relationship, next job a little bit higher than where you were. So your overall trajectory through life, you're growing, you're growing, you're growing. You're not up in a relationship, you're learning, you take a loss, you don't apply that loss, you're not aware of that loss, even worse, you're down even further than baseline. And then that happens, that's how people continually spiral downhill, or people continually spiral uphill. Compounded momentum works in both ways. So when you're tracking, all of your skills and lessons in life are transferable to the next domain, to the next relationship, to the next job, because you always have you, your mind, your body, your constituents of your psyche, that is always with you. Look at it this way. You're putting resources, you're putting currency, you're putting attention, you're putting time into the world. If you're not tracking those investments on paper, you're not going to get a return for it. You're going to lose it. Don't gamble with your life. Benefit and realization number 3. We are all serving, more specifically proving a belief or hypothesis to ourselves at all times through thought and action. Words prove who someone wants to be. Actions prove who somebody is. If I ask you, what were your major life lessons last year? You're only going to have access of what is in your immediate memory. You're going to have to think a lot. It could be distorted. It could be biased. It could be lacking perspective and insight. And when you have it on paper, when I have a year of my life on paper, I can look at this. I can extract patterns that are subconscious, because if I'm unconsciously doing something every single day, it's me. It indicates that I'm proving a belief to myself through my action. Because we don't act on what we know. Obviously, all of us know how to do better in life. We all know how to make more money, improve our relationships, etc. But we don't do these things because we don't. But there's a belief block behind that. We act on what we believe to be true about the world, not what we know. So if I have multiple data sets, if I have multiple iterations, in this case, a weekly reflection sheet, I have 52 iterations, 52 individual data points throughout the year, I can find patterns. I can find if I was doing something 60% out of that year, versus if I ask you, What were your major life lessons last year? You have one data set, and that is your memory. And that's not reliable. So as I live through a week of my life, I ask myself questions like, what was my highest high? What was my lowest low? What was my best habit, worst habit? What did I neglect? What are my roadblocks? What should I internalize this week? In other words, what's the one piece of advice I would give somebody who just lived this week and they're wanting to get toward my goals? What's a piece of advice I would give them? I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of data sets exactly like that, and I can extract patterns. This is an annual word frequency of my weekly self-advice in the internalized section. So this is 50 plus data sets, 50 plus data sets, 50 plus data sets, etc., etc., etc. This is all of my data since I started tracking. So you can see, I can witness where my priorities are, what I should be focusing on, what my weak spots are, what my strengths are, what my advantages and disadvantages are, what I should be doing, etc. The more comprehensive the data, the more practical and specific I can isolate and pin down exactly what I need to know. So those were the three main reasons why you should be tracking your life, and the three main benefits and realizations I've extracted from doing this thousands of times. To quickly recap, the first reason why is the measure, your actual measure, your value is in your ability and capacity to serve. You serve from a reservoir of competence. You establish and accumulate things to this reservoir of competence from extracting data from your life, not getting through your life. And to do that, you have to track. You have to not leave things on the table. Reason number two is monitoring goal progress actually promotes goal attainment from the American Psychological Association. Reason number three is extreme personal accountability. Now, moving on to the benefits, to quickly recap those. The first was that consistency is better than intensity. It conditions you to rely on discipline more than motivation because we know that's temporary. The second is that with frequent awareness, there's always a return on your investment. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is in vain. Nothing is futile. Reason number three is you are actually getting to the core of behavior change, which is beliefs. If you actually want to change something of your life, you're not going to change your intellectual knowledge. You have to change your beliefs. Your beliefs are oftentimes subconscious, and to illuminate the subconscious world to you, you have to extract patterns over identifying a large data set at first, instead of just one data set of your vague memory, which is biased, which is unreliable, etc. And that's just the key overview of things. Obviously, I've learned a lot more about my personal traits, my weaknesses, my insecurities from doing this. I've learned about my behavior, my relationship patterns in every single aspect of my life. I've obviously learned a lot more from all these weekly reflection sheets. But again, that's of no utility to you guys. I'm just sharing you my major overview. If you want to have levels of awareness of your patterns, of your belief systems, of your unconscious paradigms and everything, you need to have some methodology or modality of tracking your life. If you want to make graphs and data, if you want to visualize things like this, you want to realize a consistent approach, you want to realize your trajectory towards your goals, you have to extract data from your day. Not get through your day, not get through your life. You have to get from life so then you can act as a beacon to serve your future ideal and serve other people who are following in your footsteps. So, as you know, I've been using this system for about 2,600 consecutive days now. It is the most comprehensive tool I've ever been able to find on learning more about yourself and your belief patterns and your trajectory. Trust me when I say I have looked endlessly for systems that have done this. I've tried coaching, I've tried programs, I've tried courses, I've tried journaling, I've tried different people's journals and structures. Nothing in my experience is as comprehensive and as effective as this exact system here. Luckily for you, I have been able to put this together. I put everything on my website for you. If you're interested in getting something like this, if you want to get started in your journey of tracking, again, whatever level of detail that you want to get into, it can be applied to any level. Go to xenotheory.org/system. It is all available for download there. Remember that there are people in the world that will never become their best until you become your best. It is your duty, it is your obligation to get from life, not get through life. Thank you.